How do I start this video? I like Deltarune Chapter 5. I really liked it. I think I've already replayed it at least 3 times by now. Maybe as many as 5. And one of my favorite things about it is that it has the perfect facade. Whoa, those are like the words in the thumbnail or something. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things in this chapter, but let's start with the facade bit. Deltarune Chapter 5 has a constant air of things feeling wrong under the surface. I think one of the biggest contributors is how the dark world in this chapter plays out. After a long day at the festival full of epic Suzel moments, the tone does a complete 180 as Noelle gets a call about her father falling down at the festival. While it may be unclear if this means falling off of a ladder or the monster biological meaning of falling into a coma, based on Noelle's reaction and what the game has been setting up, I'm inclined to believe it means the latter. Well, if Toby's feeling extra evil, it could mean both. But the way that this scene plays out might make it the most effective of the entire chapter. We don't know if Chris was paying attention to that call or not, but Susie has no idea, and just a few minutes after that we go straight into the dark world. The reason I find this to be such fantastic pacing is because the dark world is totally separated from the tragic events that happened right before its creation, causing me to constantly forget and remember that something very bad is happening in the light world. I cannot stress enough how good I think of a writing decision this is. As far as I can tell, the only person in this dark world who has the chance of knowing what happened to Rudy besides us is Chris. I said that this was one of the best examples of Chapter 5's facade feeling, but it's certainly not the only one. A being taken shape from the golden flower. Everything about him is an illusion, but with hope, can he make it real? Flowery and the other flowers, as the game states, are neither darkeners or lighteners, but plants. As they describe, dark worlds let them fantasize a higher form of consciousness. How literal the connections between dark worlds and illusions are confuses me. Sure, Rousey describes them as illusions, but is that really 100% accurate? How does Noelle put Bertley into a coma with Snowgrave if everything in the dark world is just fake? Ultimately, the true answer likely lies somewhere in the middle. Dark fountains just don't make everyone nearby hallucinate that they're in an alternate world, but they are still fantastical in nature. But let's not focus on the confusing, possibly metaphorical aspects of the flowers for now. Let's move on to something a little more straightforward. The 7 human flowers. The flowers being human is quite interesting. While they are obviously similar to the unseen fallen humans in Undertale, the in-game explanation for them being human is that they chose to become human in the dark world. It's also interesting that a lot of them seem to have an incomplete understanding of what being human means. Of course, Flowery is one of the biggest facades of the chapter. His check descriptions, which I mentioned earlier, describes everything about him as an illusion. He gives himself fake stats, and the ultimate weapon that he gives to Rousey for buying 3 secret boss items breaks after his fight with the Knight, revealing that it too was all for show. If you think about it, the Knight really does break the facade that Chapter 5 has put up, with it slashing the damage dealt to it into zeros being one of the coolest moments of the chapter. And, of course, Flowery spends the start of the chapter keeping Asgore occupied and distracted. Or does he? He's not the only one putting on a performance, after all. On replays, it becomes very obvious that Asgore is only playing along with Flowery to get more information on the Dark Worlds. He acts quite awkwardly in the fishing scene, and a bit later into the chapter he seems to check if his color palette has changed the moment Flowery stops paying attention to him. This adds a lot to Asgore's character, since it means that all those Orlos scenes of him at the start of the chapter are really just him locking in and putting himself into a good position to gather information as soon as he realizes that he's in the Dark World. But you know what one of my favorite parts of the chapter is? The facade put on by none other than the secret boss. Some people have said that the secret boss of Chapter 5 is underwhelming. In my opinion, those people lack reading comprehension. The whole point of the Chapter 5 secret boss is that it starts off feeling like a joke, but as the fight goes on becomes more and more serious. When you first enter the secret boss room, Susie and Rousey make jokes about fighting someone strong with a good theme right before Orange appears. She gets upset when Susie suggests that we could probably beat her up and runs off into the next room, threatening to tell her big sis Pink, who turns out to be an anime cat girl. She doesn't even want to fight, instead choosing to resolve the conflict between Orange and the party peacefully, until it's pointed out that she's not one of Asgore's flowers, at which point she does a 180, gets pissed off, and attacks. In the first phase, things are just about as unserious as they get for a Deltarune's secret boss. She turns your soul purple with some tea that she presumably bought from Muffet, you have to flirt with her to make her Doki meter go up, and her unique and memorable battle theme is unique and memorable indeed, since Hatsune Miku is singing in it. You even finished off her first phase with a dating sequence. At this point, the only things indicating that this isn't some joke boss are the freedom motif in her theme and her difficult attacks. However, in Phase 2, things start to become more clear. Pink's body and soul begin to disagree, as it turns out that the Darkener body and Lightener ghost are separate beings. In Phase 3, Pink's ghost is ejected from her body with a visual effect that seems to resemble the animation for Chris ripping out their soul. And now the body and soul are separated, yet still fighting against each other. Now should probably be a good time to mention that the Miku lyrics in her theme seem to be about the weird route. This all culminates in the final dating sequence, where if it wasn't clear enough that this is a real secret boss fight, Pink breaks out the green in between Device Theory Freedom Penumbra lore pit Spampton puppet guitar strings. After the attack, Pink's body begins to break down as it can't survive without the soul. Do I need to spell out what this could possibly be paralleling? The check description also changes for each phase, slowly getting more serious as the fight progresses. Another important thing about this fight is that it seems to be the only secret boss to clearly parallel Chris, Susie, and Rousey. Pink, like Chris, consists of a soul and a body with separate motives. Pink, like Susie, is strongly against sealing a fountain because of how much better her life is in the Dark World, and is only fine with the idea once she is told that she can stay in the Castletown Dark World instead. And Pink, like Rousey, needs to respect that Darkners have their own wants and desires and exist for more than just serving Lightners. Really, I feel like this is one of the most symbolism-filled secret bosses in the game, and if you think she's not important, I feel like I have to ask if you fought her with your eyes closed. I wouldn't recommend fighting her with your eyes closed. She's pretty difficult to beat. Oh, and if you're upset that this is what we got for the last Shadow Crystal boss in the game, I have a feeling that there might be another to get the Pure Crystal. Sean does have some dialogue that makes it seem like they're itching for a fight, and that they could be a powerful opponent. Anyways, moving on to other examples of facades found in Chapter 5, Chris has obviously been doing things behind Susie's back for multiple chapters now. The whole Dark World has many callbacks to Chapter 1, including alternate versions of some Chapter 1 NPCs, as it calls back to the earliest chapter, trying to be one last fun adventure. The flowers seem to represent flawed versions of their soul traits in Undertale, from Aqua embodying the opposite of patience, to Yellow having a very wavering sense of justice. Oh, and Rousey might be trans. Trying to pretend that you're comfortable with your current gender can sure feel like having to put up a facade whenever you're awake. Alright, let's talk about other stuff in this chapter. For one, the story stuff that doesn't fully play into the whole facade theme. I really like the character development and characterization in this chapter. As many had predicted, this is a very Rousey-focused chapter, contrasting with Chapter 4 being very Susie-focused. I also really like what Asgore got this chapter as well, especially how his interactions with the flowers in the later parts of that chapter seem to parallel how he acted towards his family ever since that day. The ending was also one of my favorites so far. After one of the best Deltarune boss fights I have played, you say goodbye to the flowers and Asgore gets significant character development, no longer dwelling on the past and realizing that stalking his ex is in fact not cool. You know who doesn't care about his character development? The Knight, as it creates a new dark fountain as the current dark fountain is closed, kidnaps Asgore and slashes Flowery in half. This might be one of the most unexpected things to happen in Deltarune. At least when the Knight appears in Chapter 3, Tennis text slows down right before he gets cleaved red by Blade, which could give you the sense that something isn't right. Everything about sealing Chapter 5's fountain feels normal until the screen fades back into view and everyone is still in the Dark World. After sealing this fountain, Susie, finds a shelter code. At this point, I'm not sure how people can argue for this chapter being filler. We have a full shelter code now. Shelter codes are the main things we need to drive the plot forward. We didn't get any full shelter codes in previous chapters, did we? Sorry, I think I might just hate the term filler. Anyways, we walk Susie back to Castletown, which she now considers her home, and the end of the chapter sets up Noelle rejoining the party in Chapter 6. Given what happened with her dad, I'm a bit worried about how that's going to go. Alright, I want to talk about stuff other than story which I like this chapter. The gameplay in Chapter 5 was some of the best gameplay we've gotten yet. First of all, I really enjoyed the bosses in this chapter. I still haven't decided whether Pink or Flowery is my favorite boss yet. The Trashy Trio might be the best Castletown fight we've gotten, and I don't think that there's a single boss in this chapter that I didn't like. Outside of the bosses, my one criticism for the gameplay of this chapter has to do with the normal enemies. I think that there aren't enough of them. I think that this was handled better than in Chapter 3, where there were only 4 normal enemies, plus one enemy that doubles as a boss, since this time we have 6 recruits that absolutely count as normal enemies, plus one that seems more like a boss, and one that seems in between the status of boss and enemy. However, a lot of these enemies are just really underused. To my knowledge, the only time you encounter Shiri is in a required encounter near the start of the game, and after you beat them, they don't even respawn. Leafling also seems to only spawn in one room, and Floridan only has one respawning encounter location, plus another 2 required fights that don't respawn, one of which is entirely scripted. Hey, postscript writing me here, there is actually another encounter with Floridan that's just hard to find. During the top of castle segments, if you backtrack after completing one of the platforming areas, you will find a continuously respawning triple Floridan encounter. This is actually a really good addition to the chapter, since it's a really good grinding spot, and you can also beat it in 2 turns with Scythemare usage. Just thought I'd point that out. That being said, the game has a good reason for this. There are encounters with unique platforming enemies as well, which make up a good portion of the combat in this chapter. I do wish that they used Leafling more, as it seems to serve as an enemy made to be encountered during the platforming segments, yet only appears once. Using this topic as a segue, let's talk about the platforming mechanic. It's so good, I love it. This is the chapter's main gimmick, and it is a fantastic one. I don't think I can fully explain just how well implemented it feels. This doesn't seem like some little one-off mechanic change. This feels like something the whole chapter is built around. The movement feels great. I love how when you fall from a height you don't get stunned. The amount of secrets hidden in the platforming sections is also great, and backtracking to old areas after first obtaining the Petal Feather felt very rewarding. The different enemies and obstacles in the platforming areas were also fun to go up against. I'm really glad that they decided to make so much of this chapter platforming focused, just to show how much they could do with what they added. Also, the platforming is difficult enough to be interesting. Obviously, if it had been introduced in Chapter 1, it would have been more difficult here. The game does a good job at quickly getting over the beginner segments and jumping into more interesting platforming sections. The obstacle course at the upper left of the top of Flower Castle was probably the most difficult the platforming got for me, on par with some of the mini platforming segments in Silksong, although the platforming sections also have quite a few bosses to fight as well. I hope that they bring this mechanic back in future chapters, since Chapter 4's climbing mechanic was in this chapter as well, although it wasn't given that much focus in Chapter 5 compared to Chapter 4. I wouldn't mind there being a decreased amount of platforming in Chapter 6 compared to Chapter 5 though, since I'd rather it not overshadow the normal gameplay. I'm mainly playing Deltarune to play Deltarune after all. It would be really cool if they had a difficult Path of Pain-like optional section in a future chapter though. I think I would like that a lot. Finishing this video with my overall thoughts on this chapter, I'd like to bring up how I felt about Chapter 5 during my first playthrough. The Castletown and Festival segments were both very good, although I wasn't fully sold on the garden. I don't think it's a bad area, and I like how even though it is a remix of a Chapter 1 area, you can still see the graphical improvement, but you don't really see the Chapter 5 graphics on full display until you reach the cliffs. Also, I didn't like Flowery that much in this area, but I realize that that's the point. And as I brought up earlier, there aren't that many basic encounters in this chapter, and since you don't get the Petal Feather until very late into the garden, there aren't many platform encounters to make up for that. Once I got to the glade area of the garden, however, the game began to rapidly improve for me. I'm a really big fan of the ambient music that plays in this mini area, and the large area where you water the ground to create new paths felt so peaceful. Then, right after, you meet and fight Aqua, which improved the chapter even more, since I like Aqua's character and Aqua's fight. Of course, after beating Aqua, you obtain the Petal Feather, and from there the chapter solidified itself as my favorite chapter in Deltarune. The cliffs are a huge improvement over the garden. I love the visuals and gameplay, and the interactions with Aqua and Seth are great. The detail of the 7 suns being the 7 different colored lights above each of the flowers is also pretty cool. It gives this dark world such an interesting feel to it, since it's not as dark as the other ones. Then, Flower Castle. This might be my favorite area in Deltarune, since not only is it fun, but it is massive. It might as well be divided into 3 sub-areas, East Castle, West Castle, and Top Castle. East and West Castle both focus on a pair of flowers, one of which we haven't met yet, and the other we just haven't gotten to know very well, sort of like how Cliffs mainly focuses on Aqua and Seth. Top Castle is the final climactic rush to the final boss, and includes a final platforming fight against the 6 flowers, as well as the secret boss, and some other secrets as well. This is also probably a pretty good time to mention the humor. This chapter might be the funniest one yet. Some NPCs speak like they're straight out of a Deltarune shitpost, and there are some really good gags in this chapter as well, like trying to prevent Yellow from blowing himself up after gaslighting him into thinking that he was responsible for a crime that he didn't commit. I already explained my thoughts on the final boss and ending, but again, I love the final boss, and what happens after the final boss makes for a very memorable ending to the chapter. Oh, and I guess some people found this chapter too difficult? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't agree. I lost 1 time to the secret boss, and I don't even think that the bomb attacks on that fight are unfair. The game's going to get more difficult as it goes on. If you don't like how Chapter 5's final boss is harder than Chapter 4's final boss, I don't really know what to tell you. Deltarune fans should probably play Deltarune more. Personally, I'm glad that we're out of the Chapter 1 and 2 era, where there were barely any required bosses that could be considered even remotely difficult. Oh, and it seems like no one realized how Flowery was nerfed. He's just as difficult as he was before the patch until you lose to him at least 6 times. If you beat him on your 6th attempt, it doesn't change anything. Just wanted to mention that since it seems like a lot of people learned that Flowery was nerfed through word of mouth, instead of just reading the patch notes. This whole chapter kinda just gets better by being so big. Sure, I might have found a lot more secrets in my Chapter 5 playthrough than my Chapters 3 and 4 playthrough, but even so, Chapter 5 taking over 3 more hours for me to beat compared to Chapters 3 and 4 combined is really impressive. Plus, finding all 19 pink coins takes a while, and I had fun finding them all. Since I've already made some comparisons to Hollow Knight and Silksong, finding all of the pink coins reminded me of finding fleas or grubs. Overall, I would rate this chapter 8 out of 10 for story, 10 out of 10 for humor, and 9 out of 10 for gameplay. So far, at least in my book, every chapter is better than the one that came before it, and I hope that this continues for chapters 6 and 7.